that's why we call it this true American whiskey with a Texan heart, because no matter what, Texas is going to influence this just by being here.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
How are y'all doing? I can't talk tonight. How are all of y'all doing?
Monday.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Whelan.
And I'm Spencer Whelan. It's good to see you all.
Yeah. And this is our third week.
Third week.
Of the Taste
The beginning
the
of
Trail.
the third week.
Yes, the beginning of the third week.
Yes.
So yeah, happy Monday. Hope you all had a great holiday weekend. Got to spend some time with the family that you live with.
Yes.
Maybe you saw family from very far away. We did some drive-bys.
Holiday for 2 weeks, leading into a holiday for one day.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it's just like everything right now. It's crazy. But we're excited to be here with you all tonight.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell everybody what this whole thing is about?
Yes.
If you're watching for the first time.
If you're watching for the first time, you'll get the most details in episode 1. You can go back and I'll give a much longer version. I'm not going to do all that tonight. But basically, I'm a newbie to the whiskey scene within the last year or two, because I like to say I married a Texan, so I live in Texas.
That's what happens.
And I married a whiskey lover, so now I love whiskey.
Yeah.
That kind of worked out.
It did.
Yeah.
Worked out for me. Great.
So no, we thought this would be a great opportunity while we're all kind of stuck at home and we're quarantining. And is that a word? Quarantining?
Yeah.
It's correct use of the word?
Quaranticulating or something.
I don't know. Whatever. We're all at home.
Yeah.
But this would be a great way for us to experience the Texas Whiskey Trail. So we're doing all 19 stops, and I'm trying to learn how to taste for different notes, and I've done pretty good.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned a lot.
I think you've done a fantastic job.
Yeah.
So, now, we'll talk about this in a second, but you have a pretty big expert coming on.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited.
This is like, you're starting in the minor leagues and you're going up against a major league pitcher. So
yeah, but I don't think there's a better teacher.
I agree with that.
I
completely agree with that.
I feel like this is going to be good.
So, but before we get into that, let's just talk quickly about whatever is going on right now in the world of Texas whiskey. And most of what's going on in the world of Texas whiskey is COVID-19, like everything else that's going on in the world. And one thing that Texas distilleries are doing really, really well is they stepped up to the plate, and without being told or asked, they worked on putting sanitizer solution together for, hand sanitizers for first responders, for, local fire, EMS, police, sheriff's offices, anybody that is on the front lines of this health emergency. Tens of thousands of gallons of sanitizer has been created. And a lot of what we're working on as an association is making sure that any distillery, whether they're a member or not, has the information that they need in order to produce this. And we're calling this our Still Strong TX effort. There's a t-shirt right there that you can purchase on TexasWhiskeyTrailStore.com. So there's the URL, and just go buy a Still Strong TX t-shirt at the trail store, and it'll help support the efforts that we're doing with all of our members. So that's what's going on in the regular world. But let's bring on our guest, who, like I said, is a major, amazing, fantastically accoladed author and blender and CEO and overall badass, Heather Greene. Heather, how are you?
Hi, how are you? That was a nice. Oh, thank you.
I hope you don't mind me calling you an overall badass, because you are an overall
very
badass.
Nice. Thank you, Spencer.
She has this amazing leather jacket.
She does.
With this it's a rhinestone skull, right, on the back.
Oh, I have a, it's actually a blazer with a rhinestone skull on the back.
Even better.
I also wear a biker jacket that I wear a lot.
It's amazing. So I love it.
So Heather, you are not new to whiskey, but you are relatively new to Texas, correct?
That's right.
So
welcome.
Welcome to
It's a
everything.
lot when you're not from
I love
here.
Texas. I've been completely loving living here. It's exceeded beyond my expectations. How about that? And I already had good expectations because I was familiar with Austin. My brother-in-law lives here, actually, and my sister-in-law and nephew and niece. And as a former musician, I used to come here and play. So I actually really like Austin quite a bit. So my husband and I moved here permanently in August after me going back and forth for a couple of years working on this whiskey.
So why don't you tell everybody, like, your kind of basic career path, right? You've been an author, you've been an expert, you've been a tasting You
Sure.
run tasting classes, and now you're doing your own brand of whiskey.
Yeah, very, very lucky. I like to think of it as taking almost 20 years of a whiskey career and pouring all of that knowledge and whiskey love into a brand with this incredible team we have. So I started my yeah, I guess this career. I mean, I've always been a drinker. Can I say that?
Yeah, totally.
I've been a drinker for a long time, but in high school they don't really say things like, you never really think you're going to have a career in what you did.
A lifelong drinker career.
Yeah, but no, all kidding aside, like I was in hospitality for a really long. A lot of musicians, as you may or may not know, we often are working in hospitality as well, and so I was a bartender and waiter and all sorts of work in the New York restaurant scene. And I was in Scotland after that, and also performing. I was a piano player, and ended up working at the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society in Edinburgh, and that's really where I just fell in love with whiskey. I saw a lot of parallels between the music that I was playing or playing piano, and also the world of whiskey. So what do I mean by that? I felt like there's a sensuality to music, right? So there's just like you're listening and you're getting inspiration from things around you. But at the end of the day, you still have to have the technical ability to understand how chords are put together, or there's scales that you practice, and there's a lot of fits and starts, and things work and they don't work. But at the end of the day, there is something ethereal about being a musician, and I saw that in whiskey. So I felt very in tune with whiskey makers in Scotland, and you were nosing and you're tasting, and it's something really beautiful and are also a reflection of your environment. But it doesn't just happen by magic. It's like a little bit of magic, but then there's that technical skill involved, like the actual distillation and understanding chemistry and how casks and aging work, and how we respond to it from a biological standpoint and all that kind of stuff. So I really like the synergy of that art and science.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting.
That's how I started. That was my trajectory.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that, because there's a lot of people, both in the trail specifically on the Texas Whiskey Trail, mm-hmm. and the distillers in the association, that have all kind of said that, where they have kind of this left brain, right brain connection, mm-hmm. with the art form. And a lot of them are musicians, and they kind of take that technical aspect and then try to bleed it into the creative aspect. And I think that's really interesting, how certain forms of mm-hmm. art are very, very technical, and people kind of certain types of people gravitate towards that. And musicians tend to be one of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is definitely that left brain, right brain aspect, I think, to whiskey. Because ultimately, it's about turning off a lot of that chatter, the verbal chatter, and just nosing and smelling. And we know from a lot of scientific studies that it's better to turn off that chatter so you can really get out, just kind of let your memories and your emotion and all those beautiful things happen when you nose and taste a whiskey. Memories even.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to teach her, because she's been very much on the emotional, like love it, hate it, don't like it, whatever.
Yeah.
But now she's
I think
more
that's a
technical.
complete sentence when it comes to whiskey. I'm in a minority on that. I think people can get a little too far with their nosing and tasting notes and getting too deep into it. It's like, do you like it? Do you not like it? I mean, to me, that's a great evaluation to make.
I love that you say that, because actually, probably about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year, like as I was kind of new at all of this and everything, I picked up your book, Whiskey Distilled. And actually, I thought I had a copy here, but I realized I took my copy into the office because I wanted to decorate with it, because I also have it on my Kindle, because I always read at home on my Kindle. So like I got both. But I remember you saying that in your book. You're like, look, like realistically, you only get a couple of notes, and like think about your memories. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like, okay, good. If Heather can give me permission that I don't have to like have this laundry list of smell and taste. Yeah, I'm like, well, then I'm golden. So I love it. Which one of the questions I have for you is, so in the book, which when did that come out?
The first version came out in 2014, and then there was another iteration after that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you talk about in the book about Texas whiskeys, And so I'm wondering, did you have, like, when you were writing, did you have a lot of experience with them at the time, or did it still kind of feel kind of new to you?
Well, that's a great question. So one of the interesting things so after I was in Edinburgh, I ended up working in the Scotch industry here in the United States. And then I left that after 5 years. So I was really into the Scotch industry. First and foremost, I think people would call me a Scotch expert here in America. And I was traveling for William Grant at the time, who made Glenfiddich and Balvenie, great Scotch whiskeys. Left there, and then I started working at the Flatiron Room, and this is where it gets into what you're asking. So the Flatiron Room was really fabulous, unbelievable whiskey venue in Manhattan. It's still there. I mean, it's not open at the moment for obvious reasons, but Tommy Tardy, a good friend of mine, opened it, and I started working there as the whiskey sommelier. Now, we changed that later to, I think, whiskey director or whiskey of education, because the word sommelier was like getting everybody all messed up, and then I'd spend like hours talking about what a sommelier is or is not, and then I was like, this is too distracting. All right, so around that time is when I signed the book deal. So my plan was to go back into music. I was like, yeah, that's it. I'm going to go back into music, and work and all that kind of stuff, and because then I got a book deal. And around that time was when we started seeing this massive, it was very exciting. It was 2000, maybe 13, 14. Yeah. About 12, 13, and 14. And this is where we saw the big push and the big proliferation of all of these distilleries, not all of them now, but at the time, so Hudson Whiskey out of New York, which is a great Ralph Lorenzo. By the way, Ralph retired today after all those years.
Wow.
You know him.
To that.
Congratulations, Ralph.
Yeah.
So Hudson Distillery, and then you had some other things percolating at the time. Angel's Envy was popping up. Let me think, what else was there? Smooth Ambler, I think. Yeah. High West, and Garrison. So Garrison and Balcones. So those were the two first Texan whiskeys that we started to see in New York, or outside, I think, of Texas at the time. So I did have experience in these craft whiskeys early on. So that's where I would probably have had my first experience with the Texan whiskey. And so at the time, this was a very exciting time to be involved in whiskey and starting out. So the book mentions that. In fact, the book mentions a lot of recommendations that brands you can't even get anymore. I think I was like, hey, go out and buy a Pappy or Weller 12. I mean, so the content of the book, the meat of it, like distillation and dosing and I don't know, everything from like what casks, how to use casks and maturation, and the differences between the distills and the world regions, all that kind of stuff is still legit. But the recommendations you might want to brush. I might need to brush up add them to that, because half of those whiskeys you can't find.
Well, did you have any idea at that point that you would end up in Texas? Yeah. Like 5, 6, 7 years later, building a brand?
I had no idea that this would happen. No, there was Texas, and it wasn't any offense to Texas. I just didn't ever think of myself as moving here, and here I am. So, life takes its unexpected twists and turns, and I'm always, I think, following curiosity is fabulous, and sometimes you just keep following these roads, and here we are.
Well, that's cute. What I keep telling her is like, she's a pastor's kid from originally from Kentucky, but never visited a distillery in Kentucky. Like your family's from Kentucky, and then you grew up in Pittsburgh and Seattle, and now you're in Texas and working on a whiskey thing, and it's like, what world are we in? Yeah. What alternate timeline have we
Although I will say, like, the pastor that married us did say, like, this makes sense that you're going to Texas. Yeah. Like, we're all okay with it. Yeah. So there you go.
Weird things happen. Yeah. But what attracted you specifically to what at the time was Ben Milam Whiskey and now is Milam Greene? Yeah.
Well, the team, first and foremost. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that attracted me to it. So I was working in the background for a lot of distilleries, doing blending and tasting in the background, how to use inventory. So a lot of whiskeys have inventory, and how do you use it? How do you use the casks to create something beautiful, or don't use the cask, or, kind of increase your cost you want to decrease your cost of goods. There's all sorts of things. And then there's the branding aspect. So I was working a lot with these distilleries. And at the time I came down and they were at first the Marsha Milam and Marlene Holmes, Jordan Osborne, who were already here, had me come down and just do a few things, and just and as companies grow, they look for consultants to help out. And I just thought there was something here, right? There's that again, the art and science, there's the little bit of magic, something happened. And I just love this team. There was just Marlene Holmes is our master distiller, and she has been distilling for 27 years. It's like she can't make bad whiskey. She just knows what to do, just off the still. Like that's already like your lead. He's just ahead of the game. And then we have a distiller, Jordan Osborne, who is the chief brewer. Like our chief brewer. And I really like the idea that there's somebody who's very specifically dedicated to brewing, the brewing process within whiskey making. Because you'll learn in the book, that's a big part of where flavor development happens. So that was really exciting. Marsha Milam's a completely fascinating character. She's been here in Austin for a really long time, and she was also worked in the music industry, and it just something felt right about it. On top of that, they had a really beautiful inventory of whiskey aging. Their whiskey that was coming off the still was really great, and it just felt right. It was a kind of a gut thing. It was like felt like the opportunity felt right. And then there was this Texas aspect to it, which Texas does have a renegade, pun intended, spirit about it. Renegade spirit, and it just allowed. I was living in the confines of New York, and so here now I have like this there's land, and there's all sorts of experimentation that can happen here. There's space, which you need for warehousing space. And also I think Texas, at least what I found in terms of the distilling world, you can be a renegade and explore and experiment. It wasn't just this completely bloated, mature market that you would find in other places. So Texas has been really welcoming to us.
I mean,
really people say thank you that we're to being here. Nice.
It's nice.
It is. Well, one of the things that I talk about a lot, and the reason why we created the association was because that Texas has a brand that existed well before whiskey was ever a thing in Texas, right? Which is weird, because you would think that Texas and whiskey go hand in hand. Cowboys, whiskey, go up to a bar, right? Like that seems like a thing. But at least since Prohibition, there was no distilleries in Texas really until 13 years ago. So
that's right. And that's a lot of the U.S. was that way too.
Yeah, exactly. It was pretty much localized in Kentucky and Tennessee and Pennsylvania and a few other places. And you had kind of experience throughout all of those places. What do you see in Texas that's unique when you came here?
In terms of, what attracted me and is unique about it, I think, is that there is a bit of that, like I said, a renegade cowboy, I'm gonna do what I want attitude, which I think is great. It's not like, this is how you do it, this is how we've done it, you've got to be like that. There wasn't any of that. It's a frontier. So as a whiskey expert, a whiskey maker, that's exciting to be in a frontier. That attracted me. And what attracted me is that also, we don't really know. And it's a place to explore what happens to American whiskey in terms of terroir. So just to review, terroir are all of those physical elements that come together that can create a personality of your whiskey or your wine or cheese even. So it's like your humidity and your temperature and your seasons, rainfall, sunlight, earth, all of those natural things, all the things that happen in our physical environment will affect the aging of whiskey. I would also argue there's something called social terroir, and it's how people come together and the culture that they live in, the economics surrounding how people operate and do business, which of course happens, there's a lot of regulations here in Texas that you have to weave around. How all of that happens will also affect what kind of whiskey you produce and how much you produce and all that kind of stuff. So for me, as somebody who's like curious and just always followed different paths within whiskey, this is a way to sort of really understand, so we know Kentucky and Tennessee, for example, make these phenomenal whiskeys, 53-gallon barrels, aged at least 4 years to make something great and then beyond. And we kind of know we know what to expect there, but here we get to find out. So what I like about it is the mystery of it. And I do think a lot of people say Texan whiskey is this, this, and this. And I'm like, I'm a little bit different. Yeah. Actually a lot different, because I'm sort of saying, actually, I don't really know what it is yet.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I think that will take some time, because in the world of whiskey, 10 years is like pretty tiny.
Oh, it is. It's completely tiny. And well, one thing that I've always said is, like, I love New Yorkers, and I think New Yorkers and Texans are very similar, right? Because they have this extreme amount of pride in where they're from.
That's true.
Right. If you see somebody from New York, they're going to tell you they're from New York. If you see somebody from Texas, they're going to tell you they're from Texas. Right. And like, we like to like rag on each other every once in a while, but like, you've lived in both environments. Do you see that too? Kind of talking about that social terroir, that attitude of proprietary pride that goes into the work?
Well, for whiskey, to be honest, there's not a lot of whiskey making happening in the city confines of New York. So I would say you'd find the most of the big distilleries are outside of New York, so Catskill region, Hudson Valley, Finger Lakes region, even up towards Buffalo, northern towards Canada. So you see a lot of distilleries up there. And those all have their own culture. You know, there's very different in, say, outside of Buffalo than the culture of New York City. Right. But yeah, I think New Yorkers are tough. You know, I think it's a tough place to live, and there's a lot of grit that you have to have, I think, to be there. I think there's the mythology of it, but there's the reality of it as well. I think that, you know, I do think I think if you're drawn to New York City to live there, it's because you're drawn to trying to be the best at something. You want to be right in the middle of all of it, whether it's Wall Street or Broadway or media, and you want to be a broadcaster on CNN or Fox News, or they're all there. All of them are there. You're just there to try to have that, and to stay, to have longevity in New York. Either you're a New Yorker or you've got grit and you've succeeded. So
yeah. And it's especially, you talk about grit. It's especially, you got to have a lot of grit right now if you're in New York City.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
for sure.
I'm sure you have tons of friends there. So shout out to all of the amazing people that are going through a lot right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not easy.
No.
For them.
Well, Dale has a question. Well, first of all, let me put a couple comments up there. The Georgetown Whiskey Collaborative says, really nice to connect to folks even when we're on lockdown. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Dale Woodkey says, I apologize, I can't afford your hardcover book, but I got the soft cover on Amazon. I hope you can autograph it when I come back out there next.
I can't afford the hardcover book. There aren't anymore, and I think, what is it, like $130? Something weird like that. I don't. I have two, and I stole one from a friend. I have to give it back.
What are a lot of people are asking? What are you sipping on?
Well, I mean, you know, obviously, I have to talk about.
Exactly.
I'm very excited about something that happened this week, which is that we won we won Best in Class at ADI for our Ben Milam Barrel Proof Whiskey, and we also won double gold for both the Port Finished Rye and the Ben Milam Barrel Proof Whiskey. So I'm drinking, actually, but right now I'm drinking our the triple cask, which is the Milam Greene, 3 different casks coming together. So this little guy.
Guess what, Matt? You're exactly right.
Oh, yeah, that is what I'm drinking. So
this is, here, I'll bring it up on there. Milam Greene triple cask blend of straight bourbon whiskeys, which I remember having a conversation with you about how difficult it was to get exactly the right wording on the labels for a blend of straight bourbon whiskeys.
Yeah, so you know, there's a lot of people are just thinking in boxes of whiskey. Is it sourced? Is it not sourced? Is it this? Is it that? Is it this? Is it that? And this is a whiskey that isn't like a really popular style to make, right? They do exist, but there was a lot of going back and forth with the TTB. For those of you who don't know, that's the regulatory body that for lack of a better word, they're the people who regulate a lot of the laws in our country when it comes to alcohol and specifically labeling. So they went back and forth. We're trying to figure it out. So essentially what that whiskey is we make the core of that gives it this really nice personality and flavor. We actually make at the distillery. So we distill it and we age it and we add that. Also in that whiskey are other whiskeys, other aged whiskeys that we've already purchased and they've already been aged. So some people call that a sourced whiskey, right? So sourced whiskey became this a word that, people were afraid of, when really there's a long history behind it. In Scotland, they call it independent bottling.
Right.
I have probably, here we go. This would be considered a independent bottling from Scotland. The Scotch malt. This is an old version of, I don't know if you can see, the light is terrible in my apartment. I don't know if you can see that.
That's
cool.
Scotch Malt Whiskey Society.
Yeah, it's the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, and they bottle, right? So they find these beautiful casks, and then they blend them and batch them, or maybe it's a single cask together, and then they create that. And they have a history behind that. It's called independent bottlers. So our whiskey is we source whiskey, and then we also have the stuff that we made, and then we bring that together into something. So you have this lush cornucopia of flavors and all sorts of tools to use to make something really beautiful. And I am super passionate about the art of all these different constituents that come together. So the blending and the batching and getting to that point where I can get something really pretty with our team. The whole team does that. We're all involved in it.
So you led a class at the Bourbon Women's Symposium last August, and I was so excited. I was like front row, all ready to go. And I have to say, hats off to the blenders, because you were like, play with it, take notes. And I started doing a couple things, and then I just kind of was sipping on what you gave us. I was like, this is really good. Yeah. So I think I'm just going to drink this. And I kind of
the ones done by the experts are really good.
Yeah. But it highlighted my few little attempts that I gave it. Was just this is so crazy how many different directions you could go in blending, and finding what you have found is, I don't know, it's mind blowing to me.
Well, and it's not a lot of people talk about it in terms of cocktails, but it's not. It's almost more like cooking, when you're taking flavors and sourcing. You're sourcing your flavors from different parts of the grocery store, different parts of the world, and you're putting things together and you're creating a meal. And you guys are doing that very much. We talk about sourcing a lot, and one of the things that was core to the formation of the association was that sourcing isn't a dirty word. It's all about transparency and legitimacy, right?
Yeah.
We have the tagline, taste the truth, because we want people to know what they're drinking, that they deserve. We want to treat people like an adult.
Yeah.
And I one of the things I love about it is you look at the back of the bottle and you see, it says made with 3-year-old Tennessee bourbon, silky richness, 11-year-old Tennessee bourbon, and then the backbone of Texas. And you're telling the story of exactly what's in this bottle.
Yeah.
And I love that.
For me, it's a strength. If you have the ability to get the best tool, the best in the world and use them, then you should talk about them.
Yeah.
That's
completely.
That's a good thing, right? So I've always, even before I worked here with this amazing team, I had written an article about it. I'd written a couple of articles about it, actually. And I was part of the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society in Edinburgh, as I said, and we would look at casks and see which ones were good enough for international distribution and taste and nose those and things like that. So there's, for me, I think it's fabulous. Why wouldn't I use everything I can to create something really beautiful? Yes,
yeah,
of course.
Okay, well,
Go
ahead. No, go ahead. Finish up.
Well, I think we lost. One of the things that I really think is important as we move forward, especially in Texas and the craft distilling movement, is not to ask, did you, but how do you do something, right? So how do you harness Texan terroir or a Texan personality in whiskey? Not do you distill or do you not distill? These are, because the answer to the triple cask is much more complicated, which is yes.
Yeah,
we don't. So it's starts to fall apart. And when you get really deep into certain questions about provenance or terroir or what it means to be a whiskey, if you are just looking at it through the tiny lens of distillation, you forget all the things that happened before and all the things that happen all the things after and all the things before, like the life of a cask and how it's aged and how the people create it. And it's just a lot more complicated, I think.
Absolutely. Well, we've been talking about how even just within
Yep.
the regions of the trail, like how different the aging process is
Yes.
and what it does to the product and
how different the, like stills are from
fascinating.
place to place, and
Right.
and the blenders at place to place. I mean, we did 2 blending classes last year. One with you.
Yeah.
That if you watched the beginning of the video, you saw a little clip of that where we had about 25 trailblazers come and do an amazing blending class with you then.
Yeah.
And then we also did another one in November with, or October, whatever it was, November with
Fall.
fall. It feels like 5 years from ago, but we did one with Jared Hempstead at Balcones. And
I love Jared. He makes amazing whiskey.
Yeah, doesn't he though?
Great.
Yeah. I mean, and their entire sensory team that they have over there. And that one was blending with sources from Tennessee and Texas and other things when we were trying to replicate your blend in person. And then we went to Balcones and tried to blend a single malt from their own barrels. And it was amazing how different it is every single time. There's never a blending session that has been the same.
No,
that I've ever been a part of.
And that's what blows
and
my
I fail at all of them. I'm failing every time.
Even if you choose not to bring outside whiskeys to blend with your own whiskeys, I mean, it behooves you to understand the life of whiskey in a cask and how it matures over time, even if you decide not to do that as a practice, which is totally fine. But still to understand what's happening in your own warehouse with the casks that you do have, and how can you mingle them together because unless it's a single cask, right? It's going to be some sort of meritage or batting or blending or mingling of casks, right? So even whiskey, small craft distillers or whiskey makers that want to work within one distillery really need to understand that too, all around the country, how craft distillers, how they come together and how to create a sum that's greater than its parts, understanding how to proof it and when to proof it, all that kind of stuff is important, when to use certain cask sizes. But that's exciting in Texas. We don't know. So one of the things that just to sort of talk about what you were saying, Sarah, is like all over Texas, is that soon, I mean, things are a little shaky now because we're not sure, in terms of transporting things in this environment, but very soon we'll be putting casks all over Texas, because the only way to really know is to take your basically have, one distillate, one run, and then put those into barrels and put them all over Texas and then monitor them over time. So we're going to be doing that. And then in addition to that, sending them over the US too. Yeah,
that'll be
have like a panel together.
Yeah.
Well, there's a question actually from your official, from John Gonsel, says, what's the most interesting Texas whiskey that you've had so far?
Interesting. Interesting. That's it's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question. Good job, John.
Okay. Interesting. I would say I like this little guy.
Oh, look at that. Andalusia Striker. We've actually done a couple different things with that since then.
Yeah, that's fun.
The smoked single malt is probably 2 things I really like about it. One, I love that, visiting them. They're down the street from us, super nice people. But a smoked single malt is really fun. I love the single malts, and I love got to taste some things up at Balcones, and just really love what Jared was doing with single malts too. I mean, you could have fooled me on some of those. As originally a Scotch person, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, he's doing a really amazing job. Yeah. But
let's talk about that for a second, because Blanco, Texas, for some reason has turned into this like
whiskey
mecca, haven of whiskey. Yeah. Like you're there. Real ale and Real Spirits is literally across the street from you guys. Yeah. And then 3 miles down the road is Andalusia. We call it the Blanco hat trick if you hit all 3 in the same day. But I mean, did you have any idea that you were entering into that and that was going to form as this little whiskey mecca?
I don't think so. I don't think any of us. I think it's just by chance, actually.
Yeah.
Real ale was there, right? Brewery, but yeah.
Well, and
it's a phenomenal town.
Yeah, and even the 3 distilleries there, like y'all are so different. Yeah. And you're making something so different, which is so exciting and fun to visit. And
it really is. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously Andalusia is doing all single malt expressions of some sort or another. You guys are
Right.
doing batching, blending, and producing your own bourbons. With
Mhm.
Marlene, who's an amazing, experienced
Mhm.
distiller from Kentucky, coming down and applying her craft down here in Texas. And then you have Davin across the street taking real ale
Mhm.
brews, or beers, and taking the wash and turning it
Yeah.
into various different expressions. So
Mhm.
you guys all have 3 different approaches, but it's absolutely
That is
amazing what's
true.
going on.
And mutual respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is so great.
It's nice.
Okay.
We like them all.
Yeah.
Real ale does some great whiskeys too.
Well, we've been sitting here for a long time.
Yes.
I've been staring at this beautiful whiskey, and I don't think I can wait to try it anymore.
Okay.
So let's talk about
So let's talk about the two that we have.
that we're going to taste and some of the kind of differences to look for, and maybe that I'll be able to figure out the difference.
Okay. So we have
Well.
the triple cask bourbon, which you've
Okay.
seen, and we also have the straight rye port finished straight rye.
I see that. Okay.
Okay. Now these two, I've given her blind, so she doesn't know which one's which.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I'll get it.
I want to see if you can give her don't give her too many notes, but give her like a basic, like what should she be looking for that distinguishes one versus the other? I'm guessing it's going to be the port, but what would you tell her to look for?
Well, I think port, I don't know if you've had port and you're a port drinker, you'd know right away. But if you haven't ever had port, what you're going to look for, you're going to nose them side by side. So you don't be shy, just double fist it and go back and forth.
Yeah.
And the rye will come across, you'll have like dark fruits and raisins. So like currants, and it's like a darker, I guess, like dark fruit. I think raisin and currants, and then the other one doesn't have any of those notes. It's much more of a floral, or I would say a lighter almost bouquet, even though they're both the same proof. So I would say the rye has darker coffee and maybe if you're tasting it, has some tannic notes to it.
Yeah. Okay. So off the nose, I think this one's sorry, but let me taste.
Okay. No, I'm not giving you any.
They're very different. I mean, it's also, if you don't get it on the first try, it's okay.
Well, on the taste, I think I'm wrong.
I think that's really interesting.
Well, it's really about the nose. Whatever you probably got on the nose is the one I would pay attention to. And then there's something called retronasal olfaction, Sarah. So I want you to notice also how it comes back through your nose.
Okay.
So how you're inhaling, but also how you come back through it. So the taste, it's different, right? Because taste is really, you're not getting like vanilla and flour, all that stuff, all the stuff we wax poetic about. You're not getting that on the taste. That's all nosing. On the taste, you're getting the sweet, salty, bitter. You're getting a finish. You're getting a dry, you might get a dryness or something, a mouth feel. Those are very different things. So I would say what you probably thought you smelled on the nose is probably closer.
Okay. Well then, because the tasting, I'm thoroughly confused. So I would say, I'm going to stick with, I think this one's the rye and this one's the bourbon.
Nope.
Oh, I do this like every time, Heather.
Okay.
Bourbon and rye.
She
And
does.
I don't know. And I think it's because I can't get beyond what I think of the word spice, right? When I hear spice, I think like it's hot, like it hurts,
Yep. like capsaicin.
Yeah, or like jalapenos, or like I'm not gonna like that. Like it's gonna be too intense. I don't like a lot of heat, and so
when people say spicy rye, you start thinking rye should be spicy, and
which
that's a bit of a misnomer. I think people lack. I think there's a lack of creativity in describing rye, and so they default with spicy and peppery. But I never really found that. I've tasted some ryes that are really smooth and beautiful and round, and don't demonstrate that. It really depends on a whiskey maker. So Wild Turkey, for example, one of their, I think it was Russell's Reserve Rye, I tasted recently with our friend Daniel at the Whiskey Vault, and I was just very surprised. So rye as a grain in general will demonstrate those properties, but the way that it's distilled doesn't necessarily mean that. So when you think of spice, I think when whiskey makers or people use spice, what I mean is things like clove. Like think of clove or cinnamon. Spices from a cabinet, not necessarily spices like wasabi, right? So spices that spices, baking spices, all of that. Yeah. So when you think spice, think baking, as opposed to like heated hot pepper.
Okay, you just like nailed it for me.
Okay, because she loves to bake.
Because when I smelled this first one, I thought, oh, it smells so good. That was my first thought. I know I can't keep to my rules here, but no, it just smelled sweet and and then I went to the rye and it felt, I went to the bourbon. And I thought I smelled more kind of botanics, more earthiness. And so in my mind, for whatever reason, I think I said this before a couple of nights ago, like bourbon is sweet in my mind. And it's probably the corn, because I know there's a lot of corn. It's not that I'm right, but that's just like where my mind goes. But then when you were describing the nosing notes, and you talked about the fruit in the rye, I was like, well, that's when I started to like doubt myself.
You started doubting yourself. Okay.
Yeah, so the first one
said there was fruit and there's fruit in both of them, but the port is known for its dark fruit, meaning when we say dark fruits, we mean like currants, raisins, dark berries, dark cherries, like the darker fruits. And then there's brighter fruits, which I think of as like bananas and oranges, citrus and apples. Right. And so there's brighter, think of it in your head, like just a brighter, darker fruit kind of thing. And so there are fruits in that bourbon. And that's I probably made a mistake, which is
what I'm saying is I was wrong from the get-go. I smelled the rye first and thought it was the bourbon. And then when you started describing the notes, I was like, oh, wait, that rye sounds more like what I smelled with the first one, which I thought was the bourbon. But then I was like, no, I'm going to go with my initial response. And so, your description was great because that's what I got. That kind of bouquet of fruit is what I got from the rye, which I think I'm still reconciling that in my brain.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like my experience.
But it's also a port finished rye. And I think that's really important because you are and how long was it in the port cask here in Texas after you received it?
That's interesting. So speaking of why it's so great to work with an unbelievably talented, experienced and fabulous team is that we brought those port barrels in and expected them to be aging for a while. I thought maybe at least 9 months, 9 to 10 months.
Yeah.
And excuse me, I think it was Marlene. I think it was Marlene actually, but I don't know which one discovered it. One of the two that are there every day monitoring the casks. Were like, I think this is done. And it was really quick. It was I'd have to look back on my notes, but 2 month and a half. Month before we started seeing an incredible amount of flavor out of these casks, and we had to quickly scramble and figure out how to vat it, meaning how to get it out of these casks quickly. And then it was actually the first incarnation we tasted, and it was a little too rich and a little too strong. I brought it up to Bar Convent Brooklyn and tasted some people, and a lot of people really liked it, but I still had I was like, I think it's just a little too much. So we did a second aging in the same port barrels and, over time. So they're basically rotating and then revatting over time. So you can reuse those a couple of times, but, anywhere from, a month and a half to a little bit to longer now, which it gives it time depending on the environment. You're doing two things now. You're looking at the age of the cask and how much flavor you can yield out of that cask, and then compare that or work with the actual environment around you and how those two juxtapose or play with each other. So it's definitely a constant, a constant playing of that. Yeah. But with, Marlene and Jordan down there every day, it's hard to, I can do the other things too, that need to be done in the marketplace.
And for those who may be watching outside of Texas, like, a month or two can feel like a season. I mean, I look, this last week was like the latter part of last week. It was mostly in the 90s. I think it was like, 89 to 96, hot and humid, big thunderstorms. We had a huge, obviously there's a lot of thunderstorms going out throughout the southern United States over the weekend. But like that cold front came through and it dropped what to the it was 40s last night.
I don't know. It was
like
insane.
42.
It got cold.
Yes. Yeah. And this morning I was like, why are you wearing a sweatshirt?
I was like, because it's 45 degrees outside.
But it was just like, I know this about Texas, but still it's crazy.
So, I mean, it's a 50-degree swing from Thursday till, this morning. Mm-hmm. And that is not irregular. Like the number of like 40 and 50-degree swing days that Texas gets in a year is pretty significant. I mean, it's like 10 or more in a short period of time. Plus, even if it cycles up to the 80s and back, and I'm sorry for all of our international folks who I'm talking Fahrenheit, but anyway, like that cycling is extracting a lot of flavor out of those barrels, right?
Yes. Well, it's two things that are happening, I think, here. It's both the temperature, but then the humidity levels that will change within a given time too, because I see, I check the the humidity levels as well. And so obviously your whiskey's going to, the interaction of the alcohol and the cask are going to change depending on that humidity level. So the more humidity is going to be very different reaction than dry heat. So you have two things. You've got the temperature, and then you have the different humidity levels, and then high heat, high humid days, or high heat, dry days, or humid days at a low temperature and humid, cold temperatures and a dry day. You got. There's all these other things that go on that. So essentially, because of this variance in temperature and humidity, it's acting like I call it, if you visualize it, like an accordion on the cask, right? So it's like. Wood is made up of lignins and cellulose and hemicellulose and all these things. It's bound together by lignins, and there's like the little nooks and crannies, and your alcohol gets in there, and other elements will get in there and pull flavor. So on a really hot day, dry day, this expands and your pores and your wood open, and then on another day it rests. So you could almost call it like it's like a rapid heat cycling. So in Kentucky or other places, they might heat cycle their warehouses, and where what's happening, at least where we are in Blanco, it's happening very quickly over the course of 2 months. It's just insane. You got to be very careful. I think that makes you have to taste your whiskey a lot, a lot. And don't expect, I think that, in Scotland, it's a different thing. There's an art form to that, and it's as well. But overall, it's a temperate climate. Yeah. Right. So it never gets super hot, never gets super cold in Scotland, and it's pretty rainy. It's pretty humid. Yeah. So we get this nice, we know, you pretty much know what's going to happen in the cask. You better be careful. It's going to run up and.
How often do you go out to the distillery to taste casks?
As much as possible. And when I can't, we bottle it, and Marlene and Jordan will bottle samples. And we're right now working on our first grains of glass this year. We're going to do a barrel proof version. Hopefully, if everything works out with, I don't know how fast things are moving with the TTB, but we'll do a Milam Greene barrel proof version of the bourbon. So we're working on it. All sorts of stuff.
Well, Shannon Hood, who is with the East Texas Bourbon Society, she said the rye makes fabulous old-fashioned cupcakes.
Yes,
and they are.
Oh, they're so good.
She makes such good cupcakes. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Where do I get my hands on that?
We'll have to make that happen.
We were actually going to have some at the Bourbon Women event we were going to have back in March at 7 Grand, and then obviously we're postponed. So we'll still plan on having. We'll still
plan on something.
Make some good stuff. So I have the most important question of the night. Are we all ready?
Okay.
Which one is your favorite? Because I can't decide.
Qualitative things.
I like when people ask me what my favorite is, so I will ask you back. What time of day is it? Okay. Is it before dinner or after dinner? Is it on ice or not ice? What time of year? And am I making a cocktail with it? And who's paying?
There you go.
Okay. How about right now, if you were to drink it neat, which one would you choose?
For a podcast on a Monday.
A podcast on a Monday. Well, actually, it's a podcast on a Monday. I don't have much great lighting in here, and I'm hot, so I did the bourbon on the rocks.
Nice.
So
okay.
Now let's talk about that for a second, because I think
I'd still do that.
Okay. Now, this is something that I do like, because everybody is, fascinated with the Glencairn glass, but you have talked, and I believe you when you say this, about the value of a larger, more open mouth glass to kind of get more subtle notes. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I do like both styles, but I really love a wide mouth people and glass. But I felt like I've had wide mouth people. But I like wide mouth.
I'm gonna start using that.
Yeah. I like my people like I like my glasses, wide mouthed and full of whiskey.
Yeah, actually, yes, exactly. That's it. That's our new saying.
Yeah.
I like the full amount of. I want to give all those aromatics a nice opportunity to what they call volatilize or pop out of my glass. I want to get all of those really rich, beautiful flavors. And in the traditional, if you want to hold that up to show people, those, those glasses, you can see the bulbous bottom will hold, it's basically about holding that ethanol and then just kind of pushing it up. So what a lot of people have found, especially for beginners or people for whom whiskey's, fairly new, they get a burst of that alcohol flavor. Yeah. Where I think in wide mouth version or glass, you get kind of this, you get more delivered than just the alcohol. And I think that's really helpful. Also, I like the feel. So for me, it's not always, like I said, like it's not always just about, it's like so much coming together. It's not just about, the actual nosing and tasting and getting nerdy about it. It's like, how does it feel? How does it feel in my hand? I'm very picky about the glasses I use, like I like them to look nice. I like, this is a vintage, I think this is a 1960s glass from a friend of mine, but amazing. There's a whole world of little things that go on for me. It's a moment in my day. It's an antidote to a tough day, especially these days are. You want the presentation to be beautiful too. And so sometimes I feel like those are just a little too, I don't know the word to use.
Dainty.
Huh?
Dainty.
Dainty.
Like I want my drink and.
I know I do like using those for evaluation, so I may use those for evaluation. Yeah. But at the end of the day, when you're going to a bar and you're at home, I'm using a rocks glass. Yeah. So when I also do evaluate whiskeys, they need to work in a rocks glass too. Yeah. That's really how I'll probably be enjoying it.
And a lot of places don't have these. I will say I knocked one off this week off the counter and it like landed perfectly like this.
These things are damn near unbreakable.
Yeah,
they're crazy.
I feel like we should do side by side at some like another time of a rye and a bourbon in rocks glasses and see if like I have a better chance, because I really have made that. I've done like every kind of mistake I've made, or when I've gotten them mixed up in the last 2 weeks, has usually been around a rye and a bourbon.
Yeah, and I think that's that's important too. Is like you kind of touched on it briefly when you were talking about variability. It's like, depends who's paying. Am I before dinner or after dinner? All those things are all variables that affect your experience. Yeah. And, I think that's one of the things that when you were doing your blending class, that you really did a great job of educating. And I could tell you love educating people about just the variability and what people can learn in every experience.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it today, actually, because I'm doing a new YouTube series, bringing my book.
That's where I was headed. It's perfect segue. You knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I know, actually, but yes, it's a plug.
Yeah.
One.
Please plug.
But it is something that I was really thinking about today. Like why, and that's what I want to talk about for my next class. Is like why do I care, right? So I do enjoy educating, but why is this important to me, and why do I do this? Why, it's not just because I like to go and drink. It's like it's really a lens through which to see the world for me. So it's culture, it's people, it's a direct relationship to a plot of land or a farmer originally, or the people behind it. There's an incredible amount of economics behind this industry, so you talk about that as well. It's about how you live your life and connect with people. So it really becomes a lot more than just like, here's the notes I taste, like that to me if that is where it started and ended, I wouldn't be here. It's because it brings in so many other things.
I agree. Well, and I think what you're doing is really important because traditionally the face and like the media and what we know of Scotch drinkers, whiskey drinkers has been very much, middle-aged men in the study.
Smoke-filled room.
Right. And like
many leather-bound books. The smell of rich mahogany.
And I think that's like one of the things that drew me to your book or like really sucked me in right away was just kind of how unpretentious it was.
Yep.
And how you really were like, let's enjoy this, right? And like, let's learn about it so we can enjoy it and enjoy these experiences. And as a former non-whiskey fan.
AKA, I hate it. It tastes like plastic.
Right. No, I really I love what you're doing and your approach. And I want to see more people have exposure and experience and enjoy it for what it is. And if you never drink it outside of a cocktail, well, like just have a damn good cocktail and really enjoy it,
And Heather, I can tell you honestly, like from there is a couple demarcation points for her experience in whiskey that I notice. And one was,
we've never had this conversation. This is really interesting.
I know, right? But one of them is that when we started the association, obviously you felt like you were forced to get into it, right? There was kind of this like, okay, I have to do this. So I was
really excited. I was excited about like the business and the organizational aspect and like what I could bring to that because that's my education and my strength. So I was
because you're in accounting and you do a lot of our operations.
And I really loved everyone we met. And,
but it was all personality and business and structure.
Yeah.
And then we did your class with the Trailblazers on the Trailblazer exclusive. And then there was like an appreciation. Like I started to see your desire to be interested in the art of whiskey grow.
Yeah.
So credit to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think it's important to apply it to life outside of just the actual what you have in your glass.
Yeah. Well, let me make a last couple plugs for comments as we start to wrap up. Yes. So if you're in the comments and you have questions for Heather, please add them now. Alicia, who's on our team, she's actually our trail coordinator, said that she envisions triangles, but she gets more of a pear shape. So it's interesting to see how much softer she sees the edges as an experienced taster versus her daughter.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I've noticed that too. Like people have different ways of describing things. Sometimes they'll think of a shape. Sometimes like they'll describe it as like soft edged, round, or sharp and pointy. Other people will describe it as bright or dull, like in colors and things like that. So I think it's interesting how people define the words that they're using to describe the whiskeys. Have you noticed that as well? I mean, obviously, you've done a lot of tastings.
Yeah, I like pointing, angled, and I might bring more of that in. I think that helps. Shapes help people. Yeah. Rounded, circular. Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
The other note that I'm getting, this could just be me, and it could just be tonight. Who knows? But
which one are you drinking?
I'm on the triple cask bourbon.
Okay.
I get a little banana.
Okay.
Do you?
I've had banana. Yeah, banana is a little molecular compound that comes out of the fermentation. So the fermentation, you can get some banana fermentation and mashing and fermentation that you can get. It's isoamyl acetate. It's a little banana flavor that can happen.
That's awesome.
That's amazing to me. My brain does not think that way. So I love that you have all that information just right there.
Well, I mean, I think people don't realize, molecules, what you're smelling are little molecular compounds. Right. So that's one. And that particular molecular compound also happens to exist in bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it exists.
So Tammy says, I love Milam Greene. Enjoyed your class at SACC.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Tammy.
So you did a blending class there, I believe, as well?
I did two classes. I did a blending class, much like you've done. And then I also did a pretty full, I don't know which one she was at, but a big class on understanding labels. So the word blend, which of course I think I counted, there's 35 different kinds in the world. And to really break that down.
Yeah.
Well, this is actually a question I was going to bring up, but Charlie beat us to it. Said, with all the success you're having, what's coming up next for the team in Blanco?
That's a good question.
Oh, well, we are doing a couple of things. So Well, as I said, we have two more whiskeys that we're hoping to get out this year, possibly three. So we always do some stuff in development. Marlene and Jordan are out leading the way on that. So we're working on those things. We're also working on blending your own whiskey at the distillery so that you can come down and have that same experience and understand how the triple cask comes together. So that's coming soon to the distillery as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds like a trail experience if I've
And I
ever
have
heard
to
one.
say, like, side note, Marlene Holmes is probably one of my
Yep.
most favorite people I've ever met.
She's so kind.
She's so great. And I think like a lot of it reminds me of Kentucky and my grandmother and because the drawl and the whole, but she's just so kind and genuine and she's just great. So if you get to go on a tour and you get to meet her and spend time with her, you will not be disappointed.
And unbelievably experienced and knowledgeable about everything that she says.
Yeah.
Yes, all of them. We also have Canyon is our new assistant distiller. So he's now distilling. And then we have Brenda who runs the tasting room. So we have a really nice team there. Really great guy.
Yeah.
We're a family.
So here's a question randomly. Somebody's seeing your background. Is that Sinatra Select in the background? And is it really as close to how old Number 7 tasted in the 50s?
That is the Frank Sinatra Select in the background. That was, you're right. Thanks. I know I should rearrange. After rearranges, I've got a lot of whiskey, hundreds of whiskeys in my studio.
Yeah.
Yes, I did when that came out, I was on Bloomberg to talk about Frank Sinatra and Jack Daniels. Now, whether or not that tasted like a 1950s version is a good question. I'm not sure. I haven't tasted a Jack Daniels from the 1950s. I'd love to.
Have I?
That would be cool.
Well, so Heather, let's talk very briefly about, you guys have a lot of whiskeys coming up. You have new experiences at the distillery. Let's talk long term. What are you hoping to see, say, 5 years from now with the Milam and Greene brand, and what whiskeys are you hoping to produce? Domination. World domination.
I mean,
no, I mean, if I see, we're on a trajectory to expand in the United States, which is going to be really exciting to get our brand out to big whiskey. This year, we'll be getting our whiskey out to different states, and we're really excited about that. And then, we'll see after that. I try to take it day by day this week, but our vision is to expand and to increase the amount of people that we can reach with our whiskey and really keep our brand creating that moment, that connection, and keep experimenting and growing the company. I love working with the team that we have, and the more successful we are, the bigger our family can grow, and that would be really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, this is a perfect question from Shannon, because I'd actually like you to kind of talk about what's going to be happening. But she's saying she'd love to see Marlene and you again in Kentucky for the Bourbon Women Convention, which is called the Symposium, SIP, Symposium.
Yes.
And
fabulous.
that's, you were there, and why don't you talk a little bit about what happened last time you were there and what may be happening very soon?
Yeah. Well, I'm going again. Which, Heather, are you going this year?
Yeah, I try to go every year, so
awesome.
I'll be there. Yeah.
Well, we decided we had like kind of one extra day on this schedule to fill out the 4th week in entirety, since we have 19 distilleries right now. So I thought, well, like, why not learn from some of the women that have come ahead of us and have paved the way and know a lot. So we are going to be very honored on the 20th. We're going to have Peggy No Stevens is going to join us. She's the founder of Bourbon Women and the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, amongst writing and all the other things that she does, and is amazing. So she's going to come on.
Bourbon Hall of Famer.
Yep.
Yep.
And we're also going to have Victoria Butler from Uncle Nearest Distillery come on, and she's like 5th generation master blender. So that's going to be really cool, because I actually have the Uncle Nearest Bourbon Women selection from last year. So we're gonna, and I haven't opened it yet. I don't know. I've just like always been like, you hear people talk about it, and I always kind of thought that was silly, but it's totally happened with this one. I'm like, I've been waiting, and I was like, this would be a great opportunity to have some folks lead me through that.
Yes.
And but last year we had dinner together at Susan Riegler's house, and she's another phenomenal bourbon woman and a writer and all kinds of things. So she's going to come on and chat with us all. So I'm excited about that as well.
So Monday nights are turning into our Whiskey Women nights.
That's right.
I mean, you could talk a little bit about how Symposium is and the Bourbon Women Group. In fact, you were recently honored by the Kentucky Distillers Association as well, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yes. This year I was inducted into the first class of the Order of the Writ. So that was a big honor that happened in September. And it was awarded for people who demonstrate, I think, good work in bourbon demonstrated work in the bourbon industry over a number of years. So it was really an honor because it was had to be voted in by industry peers, ones I just love and respect. So that was really exciting. But that is amazing bourbon that Peggy and Susan and Uncle Nearest, Victoria. I haven't met her. Victoria, I think you said her. I haven't met her before, but I'd love to. That sounds really fascinating. But I'm very excited that you have them on there. Those are incredible guests.
I know. I'm so honored that they all said yes, and I'm like excited to taste a couple Kentucky things potentially.
Well, and I think it's important for us to remember that, like, the Kentucky Bourbon Trail is kind of paved the way for us to create the Texas Whiskey Trail. I mean, there's no doubt about it, right?
Yeah.
It's different because of the way we've organized it with, the multiple regions of Texas, because Texas is freaking huge. So like it's different, but Peggy helped start that up and got the whole idea going and got whiskey tourism really kind of on the map, so to speak. And you guys are now benefiting from that work as well by having the Texas Whiskey Trail and doing things like blending classes at your distillery. And so like, if you were to tell people like how to get into whiskey, not just the product itself, but into the culture and the tourism, what would you suggest people do once all of this COVID stuff is done?
Well, I mean, I think there's an advantage right here now in Texas, is if you're watching, presumably many of these people watching this are in Texas, and just, when we can, get in your car and take road trips and go to these distilleries and sample the various whiskeys that they have on hand and take notes. And then the next year go to Kentucky and do the same thing and take notes and read books. And if you can, split bottles with friends so that you can even get something like, sample bottles, split these amongst a couple of friends and go home. And so if you don't have a lot of money, you can take a bottle and split that up. And do some tastings that way, so you don't have to invest in a bottle. When bars and restaurants go open, I always encourage, that's another way to do sampling without investing. Lots of, whiskey can get very expensive. For example, if you find out you're a Japanese whiskey fan, you've got to have a nice savings account for that now. So our vintage scotches. So, really old, it depends on what your style is, but a way to really check that out is to do that at bars and restaurants and order a couple different things and see, even split those. I've done that before. So most restaurants, especially if you're in a really nice bar or whiskey bar, like a place like 7 Grand, they would, they love to do that. I mean, you could just sample a couple of different things. So those are the ways I do it.
That's a great idea.
Well, last question, as we wrap up tonight, you guys have been part of the sanitizer effort as well. You guys were on the early end of that. You guys have been helping your community along with a lot of other distilleries. It's not easy right now for any distillery, regardless of who you are, to be dealing with the closures and distribution and all the things that are happening. What can people do to support Milam Greene whiskey right now?
They could buy one of the award-winning bottles at the local retailer. You can find that on our website. If you have any problems, you can reach me or my staff on Facebook. We're all our Milam Greene is on Facebook, so you can do that. And I would say support us by buying a bottle or buying a bottle as a gift and make a really great cocktail out of it. On Friday, one of our ambassadors is going to do a video to how to make a really pretty cocktail, so you can do that with your bottle. But that's really, really the most important way to support all of us here in Texas, is to buy bottles of whiskey and start a collection.
And where can people watch your online classes?
Yes. They're so good.
YouTube. So I put a link up on YouTube. We'll be doing that every week starting last week was our first class. So we're going to be doing that every week. They're about 6 minutes long. Just down and dirty, like well, a little better lighting because I do it during the day, but just a down and dirty kind of whiskey class. Like one of the things that Sarah said, no pretension.
Yeah.
At all, and just try to have fun and just really educate people, because I think an educated consumer is very, very important. This is a $400 billion. I think it's the arena of whiskey is like close to, or alcohol in general is about $400 billion now. So might as well know what's going on.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, Heather, I feel like you've always belonged in Texas. Like you just fit right in.
You do.
Really makes sense. Oh. Yeah. I'm glad you're here.
Well, that's really sweet to say.
Well, Heather, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Yes.
I know we went a little bit over an hour, but thank you so much.
Thank you guys for including me and welcoming all of us to Texas.
Yeah, absolutely.
And here's the link for those who want to see it. But go find the Milam Greene Whiskey channel on YouTube. We'll link to it in the comments later as well.
Get your hands on
both of these bottles.
I can't. I mean, I'm leaning towards the rye only because it turns out that's like ryes are my favorite.
Right, she liked it.
But I don't know. Like, I keep going
It'll
back.
Change. The temperature.
Good.
It'll change depending on the day and all that stuff that you feel like doing with it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The rise of Texas are upon you.
Oh no! Okay, we got to cut him off. That's.
I had to throw a dad joke in there somewhere. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much. Heather, we're gonna end on the video that we shot from our last trail event. And thank you again so much.
Yeah.
Cheers to you.
Thanks for being so great, and thank you guys for all your work. It's tremendous.
We appreciate you so much. So. For all of you, join us tomorrow night. We'll be with MKT Distillery.
Yes.
And a great little distillery in Katy, Texas, and we'll talk to them tomorrow night. So all y'all take care, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Stay healthy.
Bye. Cheers.
That's why we call it this true American whiskey with a Texan heart, because no matter what, Texas is going to influence this just by being here.